You can hear it. You can feel it in the air.
You can feel it in the air.
You already know what time it is.
College football is here, and it's time for the Tribute to Troy podcast.
Bringing you NCAA football news, updates, and insights from the perspective of a USC Trojans fan. Now, here's your host, Troy Woolbrandt.
Whew, man, that is just, that intro's the best. Guys, can you believe it? It's football season again. It's been football season for about 3 weeks now. I'm a little late to getting this podcast started, but man, it feels good, man. It feels good. It feels like there's football on every single day of the week. So, this is the Tribute to Troy podcast. Welcome to the very first episode. I am Troy Woolbrandt, and this is essentially me just giving my feelings on college football right now, and talking about news, talking about scores, talking about what happened, talking about how I think this season's going to go. I've been a USC fan since, I'd say probably about 8 or 9 years old. I got into football right about at the tail end of the Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart era, which, that's a bummer, because I missed out on all the really, really good stuff. Although, based on how things are going right now, it looks like we're starting to head back towards national championship contention again. And man, it's nice. Anyway, I've got a lot of ground to cover here because I missed week 0, which is that weird segment where the Mountain West essentially said, hey, we're a weird conference. Please notice us. We're going to play college football before anyone else starts, before all of the kickoff events. So we had week 0 where Oregon State played Colorado State's. A couple other games happened. I don't remember too well, but then we also had Stanford going to Australia to play Rice, and they beat up on them pretty well. The actual week 1 of college football wasn't super eventful. Everyone who was supposed to win won, so Ohio State eventually pulled away from Indiana. That was a really tight game there. That wide receiver, Cobbs, he went off. And I actually thought Indiana stood a chance there. I thought they were taking it into the third quarter, going back and forth, and then Ohio State just went off on big play after big play after big play. And so, so they managed to avoid the upset that week. We'll get into that in a minute, because that didn't last very long. Their rivals, Michigan, they played Florida. That was a pretty interesting game. I mean, the fact that Michigan can throw back-to-back pick sixes and still win the game by multiple scores, that's insane, man. Michigan, I mean, you've got a decent team. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's not a bad coach. I don't like him, but he's a good coach. You guys have a good defense, you have a good run game. Your quarterback is awful. I'm sorry, but that's just, your quarterback's awful. I'm sorry. I have nothing else to say from the Michigan-Florida game. Michigan's probably going to go back to another New Year's 6 game, but this isn't the year that they're going to go and shock the world and go to the playoffs. I'm sorry. It's not happening with that quarterback play. But congrats on beating Florida. Congrats on beating Cincinnati the week after, barely. I have nothing against Michigan. I don't hate Michigan. I don't like Jim Harbaugh, and I don't like the hype every single year that keeps on leading to nothing, which, those who live in glass houses probably shouldn't throw stones, considering where we have been, where SC has been as a team for the past 5 years, but hey, whatever. So, those 2 games were kind of the big highlights. And we also had Maryland upset Texas. I totally didn't see that coming. That was a weird game. Just all the special teams things, and Maryland's just suddenly playing decent after dropping off the map for a while. Just in general, they have not been a good program in recent years. So yeah, those games, and then you had Florida State versus Alabama. Just, I'm so bummed because Florida State looked like they were gonna pull it off. Just saying, a couple of plays that go in another direction, like when they're driving down at the end of the first half, and that pass interference call that doesn't get called. Yeah, that Alabama cornerback straight up tackled the receiver. Didn't even look for the ball. Just terrible, man. And to lose your quarterback at the end of the game in that way, I'm sorry about Francois. If there's any Florida State fans listening, I'm sorry. That's brutal because you guys have a championship caliber defense, but I guess you guys will see what the backup can do. I don't know. You guys have a good team. I'm sorry that you had to lose your potential Heisman candidate quarterback in the first game of the year for this season. That's brutal, man. I'm sorry to all the Seminole fans out there. I'm sorry that I'm bringing this up after 2 weeks after the fact because you guys are probably just starting to get over it, and now I'm bringing this up. So anyway, that was week 1. And I'm going to just combine week 1 and week 2 together when talking about my team. We opened against Western Michigan. USC opened in the Coliseum against Western Michigan, who is coming off of a Cotton Bowl appearance, their best season in school history, and they've got like 6 different offenses coming in. For those of you who don't know, they switched out their head coach at the end of this past year. Like their old head coach got hired by Minnesota. Their new head coach came in and brought staff members from all across the country. And so Clancy Pendergast, our defensive coordinator, straight up didn't know what they were going to run going into week 1. And they came out and they ran just spread formations and ran the ball up the middle all game long. And there was never a point in the game where I thought, we might get upset by Western Michigan. Even when they had the lead, I'm like, yeah, no, this is stupid. We're going to get it together and we're going to pull this out. But it's bizarre to watch because they have great playmakers. They're going to have a great season because they have playmakers. They have an offensive strategy together. They know what they're doing. They're going to pull this out. But just everything that could go their way for the first half went their way. Like penalties in bad spots, weird turnovers where like the ball would bounce off of someone's leg and someone's arm and hover in the air for 10 seconds before someone picks it off. It's bizarre, man. And everyone made a huge deal about, Sam Darnold had the worst day in his career. And it's so stupid because he made maybe 2 or 3 bad decisions. One of them wasn't even in the interception. That was just straight up, it bounced off a receiver's hands and got picked. So, that was a stupid game. But I'm glad that we pulled away at the end and that we did manage to get that moment with Jake Olson. And man, that was the news story. That was the news story of the week for that entire weekend. It's such a cool story, man. Just for those of you who don't know, Jake Olson is a blind long snapper. He was someone who was a fan of the team. I think he's my age, actually. I think, I think he's my age. So he had surgery to remove a tumor. What's the tumor? There's something going on with his eyes. He had to remove one of his eyes, and then he lost sight in the other one. But he was a huge USC fan, and Pete Carroll kind of took him on near the end of his tenure there at USC and just said, hey, you're part of the family here, man. Just let's keep you around the locker room, bring you out for a couple games. And then Jake Olson decided, hey, there's a position on the field where I can still play even though I'm blind, the long snapper. All I have to do is go through the motions, get out there, snap the ball, have someone tap me to kind of signal when the ball needs to be snapped, and then by rule, you cannot touch the long snapper because their head's down between their legs, and if you hit them, that could lead to injury. So recent rules have said, hey, you can't touch the long snapper. So that's So yeah, Jake Olson said, okay, I'm going to be the long snapper for my high school. And then he got recruited by USC and he got brought on. And week 1, he got brought on to snap for an extra point. And it was a beautiful moment, man. It was great to see someone overcome a disability like that. It's great, man. He seems like a cool guy too. I'm glad he got that moment, even though it was in a kind of an awkward game that everyone, nobody got let off the hook because of it. Everyone was still talking about like, okay, that's great. That's a powerful, beautiful moment. Also, why was Western Michigan still in the game there? Which brings us to this week. Our team went in with a chip on our shoulder, and we went against a team that recently has just beaten up on us. And I have no problem with saying that because that's the truth. Stanford, from the end of the Jim Harbaugh era through the David Shaw era, has been the more physical team. And even in years where we won, it was hard fought and we had to get some turnovers, we had to get some lucky bounces, we had to get everything to go our way to squeak out a win. And if there was any team on the schedule we looked at and said, okay, this is the game that's going to decide the season, Stanford was the one. Because all of these years, whenever we get hyped up in the preseason, whenever we're like, okay, this is the year we're finally coming back, we're finally going to stick to the NCAA for what they've done to us, and we're going to finally pull through and take that next step and be national championship contenders again, we run into Stanford. And so we knew we were in for a dogfight going into Stanford this year because we gave up 200 plus rushing yards to a MAC team. Even though they're the MAC champions, even though Western Michigan is a great team, we gave up over 200 yards rushing to a MAC team. So, going into the Stanford game and winning in the way that we did was one of the most satisfying things I've in a while. I don't know where to place that because I was also physically at the Rose Bowl for the Rose Bowl game this past year, so not entirely sure where to place this. But the more I think about this game from last Saturday, the more it kind of resonates how different this team is this year. We ran the ball for 307 yards on Stanford's defense. We allowed less yards rushing against Stanford than we did against Western Michigan. We put up 600 yards of total offense on Stanford and beat them by 3 scores. This isn't something that happens in the USC-Stanford rivalry. This is the first time in a long time that we out-physicaled them. And not by a little bit, we destroyed them. The scoreboard won't show it, but they couldn't stop us. Sam Darnold's made a couple of weird decisions, and those 2 interceptions and 1 punt. Those are the only drives that we didn't score on. It's nuts, man. That game was so great to watch. To know that we're going to run the ball, they know we're going to run the ball, and they can't stop us. Every play went for a positive gain. Again, we punted once, and it's like watching The Karate Kid, except instead of the skeleton guy getting beat by the crane kick or whatever it is, it's like if Ralph, I think his name's Ralph. Is his name Ralph? I haven't watched The Karate Kid in a long time. It's like if the Karate Kid went up to the main bully guy, and instead of getting him in one move, just punched him in the gut, then punched him in the face, then punched him in the face again, right hook, left hook, right hook, left hook, right hook, left hook, until he's on the ground, bleeding and trying not to swallow his own teeth. This was an intense, physical game, and we were just... I was watching with my dad, and we were just amazed that in the third quarter, these Stanford defensive linemen had looks on their face like, we don't want to be here. Please send someone else in here. We don't want to be on the field right now. And for all the offensive linemen, for all the running backs to come through USC over the past couple years since Pete Carroll has left, I have never seen that. I have never seen dominance like that in a game, and it's just incredible. And so I'll stop gushing over the win for now. There still are some things that didn't go quite as well. What's the craziest thing about this game is that we could have dropped 50 or 60 on Stanford. If we didn't have those two stupid picks, if we didn't make stupid penalties at stupid points in time, we could have won by even more. And that's the craziest part. They literally stopped us once. The rest were turnovers. And also us kneeling down at the end of the game. This was the ultimate statement game. I'm trying not to hype this up too much because I know there's still a lot to improve on, and there's always the chance that maybe this just isn't Stanford's year. But you gotta understand, they've been such a roadblock for years now, and to win in the way that we did is just incredible. So, tale of 2 weeks, isn't it? We give up 31 points to Western Michigan. We beat Stanford by the same point margin. We beat both teams by 18 points. And what a difference a week makes. So now going into this week, we're going up against Texas. Before I talk about Texas, let's talk about this past week. So let's get right into some scores here. Play that music. The week kicked off in South Alabama, and it was not even close. Oklahoma State rolls over South Alabama 44-7. That Oklahoma State offense they're looking pretty good, but let's see what they look like when they play some actual competition. Speaking of easy wins, meanwhile, elsewhere in Alabama, the number 1 Crimson Tide took on Fresno State, and also huge blowout there. Not as big as you would think, though. 41-10, Alabama, and taking the day off, getting some backups in there. Both Michigan and Wisconsin had pretty tight games early on that they managed to pull away late from, so they don't really look that close on the scoreboard. Michigan beats Cincinnati 36-14, and Wisconsin pulls away from Florida Atlantic 31-14. Moving around the country a bit, number 15 Georgia goes into South Bend, Indiana, and they beat Notre Dame by 1 point, 20-19. Tight game the entire time, real back and forth competition, but they pull away. They get a slight lead in the fourth quarter, and they shut down Notre Dame's offense when it mattered. Louisville survives against North Carolina. It was a bit of a back-and-forth game there, but Lamar Jackson ultimately led his team to victory with just a ridiculous video game stat line from the former Heisman winner. Something like 600 yards of total offense, 6 touchdowns. Another great early season performance by him. We'll see what he looks like as we get into the deeper part of that conference, and we'll see immediately what he can do next week against Clemson. Speaking of Clemson, massive defensive battle last week between Auburn and Clemson, and just Clemson's defense showed up to play. They got just a ridiculous amount of sacks. I think they set their school record for sacks. They had tackles for losses all over the place. They really made up for an underwhelming offense, and I think suddenly out of nowhere, the ACC is now the conference of just stifling defenses. You got Florida State, you got Clemson, but will this defense be enough to get them into the playoff contention? Well, it was enough to beat Auburn. Clemson pulls away 14-6. Penn State gets revenge on in-state rival Pittsburgh as they get that W 33-14 with another great performance by Saquon Barkley. That just saw firsthand the Rose Bowl. That dude he's on another level. Speaking of avenging losses from last year, TCU goes into Arkansas and gets the victory 28-7. Pac-12 After Dark, it's a very special thing for the West Coast. It's when the Pac-12 schedules games that start after 7 p.m. Pacific time, basically the middle of the night over on the East Coast. And we had a classic example of just some Pac-12 after dark weirdness with Washington State taking on Boise State. Washington State down by 3 scores in the fourth quarter, turns it around, forces overtime, and with a backup quarterback, Washington State gets the win 47-44 in triple overtime. Probably the greatest game you've ever slept through, and not in a boring way. And in the biggest game not involving my SC Trojans, the 5th-ranked Oklahoma Sooners go into the horseshoe, they go at Ohio State, and knock off the 2nd-ranked team in the country. It's a tight game early on, but then Baker Mayfield takes over late in the third quarter, and Oklahoma just runs away with this. 31-16. Maybe a little bit of excessive celebration at the end. Baker Mayfield takes the Oklahoma flag, runs to midfield, and plants it right on the logo. I don't know, man. If that was a rival, I could see that, but you're not going to play Ohio State ever again, so I don't know, that feels a little excessive. But hey, if Ohio State doesn't like it, they had 60 minutes to make sure that didn't happen, so. And you are now caught up on all of the major scores from the past week, and let's get into some news here.
Let's get right into the news.
So since we're so late in the week, there's not a ton of news to break. I mean, the AP polls have already been out for a very long time. By the time you hear this, we're probably going to hear some game results. This is probably going to be after Saturday's lineup of games. But anyway, there are still a few things to cover. First off, I just kind of want to give my thoughts on... Look, in the AP polls, there were a bunch of Florida teams that did not play this week for obvious reasons, because, you know, they got a hurricane right in their backyard. You can't really play a football game in 180-degree mile-per-hour winds. Like, I know, us millennials, we can't play in a hurricane? No, that's just if it's not one thing, it's another. But seriously, like, there's nothing you can do about that. You have to cancel games. You have to think about people's safety. And so on one hand, I get that they didn't play and other teams played really well, so Florida State's going to drop. Florida dropped. They didn't drop by a bunch, and that's good, but they dropped a bit. And that's kind of a bummer. I feel bad for them. Because, I mean, again, it's not their fault that a hurricane came and forced them to stop playing. It's just, I don't know, man. So that's a bummer. I get it. I hope that they come out, that Florida State, they come out this week and in Miami too. They were, I believe, they were ranked and they dropped a bit. I hope all 3 of those teams come out and just have great performances and just make up for last week. Even though, again, totally not their fault, and it's a bummer. Also, again, thoughts on just the Baker Mayfield thing. It's just, I get wanting to, if it was a rivalry game, like if this is USC, UCLA, USC, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, like, just, if this is a rivalry game, then I get it. You want to rub it in a bit, and it's all in good sport, because next year, they can rub it in just as hard. This is the second game in a 2-part series. Ohio State played in Oklahoma last year. And so now these 2 teams probably aren't going to meet for at least another half decade. And so that's just, it seems excessive. It seems, I'm not going to say classless, because I just hate using that word, just because the people who brag about being classy or talk down to people for not having class, they're not really classy people themselves. It tends to be the case. It's sort of like how people misuse the word karma and they just throw it all over the place, but I don't know, actually, yeah, it was a little classless. I think I'm using that word appropriately. It was classless to rub in a victory that much. Under different circumstances, I would have loved to see it. If there's a chance that team would see that other team again at some point, then absolutely. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, It's a bit much. And also, in slightly lighter news, let me just pull it up here. So, Murray State is a FCS team. So, why am I talking about an FCS team? Well, defensive lineman Bishop Woods, after practice on Tuesday, he married his girlfriend right on the practice field because their coach is an ordained minister. And that's really cool. I'll link, if you're watching this on YouTube, there'll be a link to the article in the description. But it's just, I thought that was kind of cool. That's, it's not something you see very often. So what makes college football truly unique is that more than any other sport, you see constant uniform changes, constant tinkering with how your team is going to look on the field on a week-to-week basis. And so that's why I've got an entire segment dedicated to that. So we're just going to scroll through Uniswag and see what's new this week as far as uniforms and all that cool stuff.
Man, I like these pants.
When you only got one day to live, you better wear some nice pants.
He wouldn't admit it, but Donovan knew that for such an occasion, he should have worn nicer trousers.
So first off, speaking of pants, I'm not supposed to compliment UCLA on anything, because, I mean, come on. Why would a Trojans fan compliment a UCLA thing? But, I mean, their new uniforms, like their redesign of the classic uniforms, they look pretty good. Under Armour definitely did some justice to what I believe is the second best uniform in college football. I think when USC plays UCLA and we both have our home uniforms, that is just the best looking game in the country. And my general philosophy on uniforms is you shouldn't look for just the style of the month if you have an identity. You should be looking for your identity. And USC and UCLA found their identity. They've got their colors, they've got their look, and I'm glad to see that UCLA is getting over that whole Adidas mistake where they put like the tire tracks on the front of the uniform. It's just ridiculous. And also this week, sorry, I started the segue with now speaking of pants, and I didn't get into it, but they brought back the gold pants for their road uniform. They had a weird thing where they did white pants at all of their road games. That's still an option, but I'm glad to see that they're bringing that back because it's a weird look. Like, why wouldn't you want to add more color to your road uniforms? It just seems weird. Either go all Stormtrooper, go all white, or just add some color in there. Like, Michigan took away their gold pants on the road, and that's stupid. It looks stupid. I'm sorry to keep ragging on Michigan out of nowhere, but your road uniforms look stupid. And UCLA, I'm glad you corrected that. So don't lose to Memphis. Just don't make the conference look bad. Also, so there's this thing going around called I can't remember what it's called. It's Arthasite, I think is how it's pronounced. It's like a really dark gray, light black uniform. I don't know how to describe it, but every team has been getting one. It's an epidemic, and I don't get why. So Missouri and Washington State will be getting Arthasite uniforms. And again, they're not gray, they're not black, they're just right enough in the middle to be annoying and not fit with anything. It's stupid. Stop making these uniforms. And let's see what else. I'm not going to cover everything that every team in the country did this week as far as uniforms, but just the ones that interest me. Boise State went all orange this week. They clashed with that bright blue turf, and they brought out all orange. Orange helmets, orange jersey, orange pants, and they beat New Mexico like they were supposed to, but looks pretty good doing it. The Minnesota Golden Gophers, they're going all yellow, or I guess gold this week. They've got replacing their helmet where they've got the M on both sides. They've got the M on one side and then a giant gopher face on the other side. And I don't know how Nike does it, but they made the ducks. They made a duck intimidating and they made a gopher intimidating. I don't know how. Well, not intimidating, but they made it look good. They made it look. I guess it looks cheesy, but it looks decent. Again, I'll put up pictures of all these. And speaking of the Ducks, last thing I will bring up is the University of Oregon, the Ducks. They brought back their best color scheme that I think they have in their repertoire. So back when they beat Florida State in the Rose Bowl during that college football playoff run, they had these uniforms that were not Kelly green. I think they called it apple green. It had an apple green and yellow uniform, and with the matte finish. For those of you who don't know, matte essentially it's like a type of paint cover, and it just makes the helmet look like bowling ball type texture. Again, pictures on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. And they decided to break those uniforms out, but do it like for the road game. So, apple green helmets, apple green pants, apple green everything else. Plus, a little subtle thing on the side. They got the like little simple stripes on the sleeves, and that looks cool. This is the best that Oregon's uniforms have looked in a while, because they try too hard. They've been trying too hard for the past couple of years, and just this is their identity. This is what they should be. Big yellow O on the side of the head, apple green color, matte finish on the helmet, just looks good. Oh, also, last thing, Utah had a new logo on the side of their helmets for this week's game. I think they're calling it like Ute Proud or Utah Proud or something. It's essentially like, hey, just Native American appreciation thing. I don't know what to make of the logo, but it looks pretty neat. And there's all the uniform stuff that I generally care about. So we're going to move on to the next segment. I really haven't thought of a clever transition soundbite for this one. So just say this week I'm talking predictions on how the games are going to go. So yeah, let's do that. So I'm just going to quickly roll through some of these games around the country right now before we get into the big matchup, USC versus Texas. And so let's just get through this a little quickly. So Miami versus Florida State, the two teams that... Oh, actually, I'm sorry, this game got postponed too. Huh. Wow, Florida State, geez, they're getting screwed over right now. Their last game was against Alabama, and just... Man, that got postponed too. That's nuts. So yeah, Florida State and Miami aren't playing this week. Never mind. Wow. Okay. So Michigan against Air Force. Again, Michigan's gonna take this one. The line currently, Vegas is saying it's a 23-point spread. I don't think Michigan's offense is too great right now, so I'm gonna say it's gonna be a lower. Actually, you know what? 23-point spread, that makes sense. I'm gonna one up them. I take back what I just said. So I would say Michigan over Air Force 24-0. I think Air Force gets shut out, but Michigan doesn't put up a ton of points. Oklahoma State versus at Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh being at home doesn't make too much of a difference. Oklahoma State goes in there, drops a bunch of points. I'm going to say 45 to 28? 45 to 28. Seems about right. UCLA at Memphis. UCLA hasn't really... Well, actually, so the Texas A&M game is looking not quite as impressive as it did a week ago, even though, again, coming back from being down 44 to 10 at one point in the fourth... Sorry, not fourth quarter. At one point in the third quarter is nothing to scoff at. But Texas A&M might not be as good as we thought, so this is another sort of test as they go out to the East Coast. And again, it'll be 9 a.m. on the West Coast, so we'll see how they react to traveling and all that. But I think UCLA gets the win. I'm gonna say 28 to 21. I think it's a one-score win over Memphis. Wisconsin at BYU. Wisconsin is quietly rolling. They're one of the better teams in the Big Ten. Super underrated. I think they're going to take this one over BYU. I'd say 31-7. Virginia Tech at East Carolina. I don't care, but I mean, I know nothing about either of these teams. I'm going to say just Virginia Tech over East Carolina, 23-7. SMU against TCU. Supposedly a rivalry game. I don't see it because I'm sure they hate each other, but TCU has just been clobbering SMU for so many times these past few years. So I'm going to say 40 10. TCU over SMU. Tennessee and Florida. For some reason, Florida, their game's not canceled, even though they're playing in Florida. So, yeah, I just think Florida wins a close one over Tennessee. I'm going to say 24-21. Auburn versus Mercer. Okay, Auburn versus Mercer. I refuse to even give that a prediction. If Auburn loses this game, I'm going to laugh. So, have fun on your bye week, Auburn. I hope you have a great time. Ohio State versus the Army Academy at home. I think Ohio State bounces back, and they really, really run up the score to try and make up for that embarrassing loss from last week. I'm going to say 63-27. Oregon State against Washington State. Washington State breaking out those terrible Arthasite uniforms. And I think they win, because poor Oregon State, they're not going to be good for a while. I feel like they're trying to build something there, but it's still a little bit of a ways back up. I think Washington State takes this one, I'm going to say 42-10. Tulane at Oklahoma. Oklahoma wins 56-17. Colorado State, Alabama. I would love so much for Colorado State to go into Alabama and upset them. I just don't think it's going to happen. I could see Alabama getting caught off guard, though, so I think this might be a closer game than people would expect. I'm going to bold take here, Colorado State will not lose by much. I'm going to say 35-24, Alabama wins by a 2-score game, but it's closer than people would think. LSU at Mississippi State. LSU takes this, let's say 17-7. Georgia State, Penn State. Penn State's on a roll. They're going to win easily by, I'm going to say 35. I'm going to say 42-7, Penn State. Samford at Georgia. That's another one I'm not even gonna dignify with a prediction, because Georgia better beat Samford. That's just not Stanford. Samford. Like, I can't find them on a map. That's nuts. Kansas State versus Vanderbilt. Slight upset alert, maybe, if I cared at all about Kansas State, but I think, fine. I'm gonna go against the spread here. I know nothing about these two teams, but let's do it anyway. I'm gonna say Vanderbilt over Kansas State by 28-24. Now, this is the first of a couple of big ones this weekend. Clemson and Louisville. Now, it's going to be a battle between Clemson's great defense and Lamar Jackson. And I think they're going to go back and forth for a while. Hot take. I think Clemson's offense isn't that great. They are average at best, and I think if this game gets into a shootout, they won't be able to keep up. So I think if Louisville can score not even 28, if they can score more than 3 touchdowns, the game's over. So I'm going to say 35-21, Louisville over Clemson. Second upset. Back-to-back upsets. Are we going to go for 3 straight upsets? No. Fresno State at Washington. No, Washington's going to beat Fresno State. I'm going to say, they've been putting up a lot of points. Let's say, 56-10. Or 56-17. Stanford at San Diego State. San Diego State's coming off of an upset over Arizona State. I don't think they're going to beat Stanford. They're pretty shell-shocked from losing to SC in the way that they did, but they're going to win this one. I'm going to say 34-14. And now, all of that out of the way, let's talk USC versus Texas. This is a game that we have had circled on the schedule for a while because, gosh dang it, the 2006 Rose Bowl USC versus Texas, Vince Young running it at the last minute and stopping us from getting our third straight national championship. I still have not watched the game since I was, I think, 8 or 9. And it's just, it's too painful, guys. It hurts to watch, and I cannot wait to beat these guys up. They're not the same team. No one from the 2006 Texas Longhorns team is still there, but let's put some grass stains on those white uniforms. I want to beat this program just so we get some new highlights and I don't have to see that freaking 4th down run for the touchdown every single time someone talks USC versus Texas. I want some new highlights. You can't undo what happened unless you're the NCAA and claim that, oh yeah, those wins are vacated, and, well, that didn't happen. So we'll talk about the NCAA and all that stupid stuff later. But I've been thinking about this game for a long time. And so going into this game, we will probably not have Porter Gustin, our great pass rusher, because he had surgery on a cracked toe. And that's sounds super rough for you and me, because holy cow, that's something that we'd probably be in a cast for a while, would complain about all the time. This guy was raring to go for playing in the game, because he had surgery on Wednesday, and he wanted to get into the game on Saturday, and I don't think he's getting in, guys, because yeah, he's doubtful, because that's a plant foot. When you're pass rushing and you're running around and you just, that toe is a big part of it. So if he's not 100%, I think we just need to put our backups in. Coach Helton has said he will be available for the Cal game. I think just rest him. Let's have him when we go to Cal. Daniel Imatorbhebhe, our stud tight end who has not played this year, will continue to not play this year because that hip injury is still bothering him. This is the game I want to see some of our wide receivers show up. Like Strong, or whoever 21 is, and like Velvis Jones, and all these guys who were getting hyped up in the preseason. We're hearing all offseason about how they had great chemistry with Sam Darnold. They're making plays all over the place. They're just playmakers. I want to see some new faces catch the ball this week. Because Stephen Mitchell, he's great. Love him as a receiver. Deontay Burnett, over the past 4 games, he just went from absolute nobody to, well, not absolute nobody. I mean, he's a decent player, and then he became a superstar over the past couple of games. So, love those guys. I just want to see somebody new step up and make plays for the offense. And all of that being said, ton of respect for this Texas team. Herman, their new coach, he's great. We're going to beat them. I have no hesitations of saying we're going to beat them by 3 scores. And this is the first sold-out game in quite some time for the LA Coliseum. Over 90,000 in attendance. And that stadium is going to be rocking. Last week against Stanford, that We Are SC chant that came on in the third quarter, you'd feel the energy in the crowd. And when we get things going, we don't have... we have a great home field advantage when our crowd gets into it. We're not as consistent as like an LSU or a Nebraska when it comes to home attendance and home crowd affecting the game. But the LA Coliseum is underrated when it comes to being intimidating to opposing teams. And so, yeah. If this was in Austin, I don't know, maybe this would be a tight game. We will be playing in Austin next year. That'd be an interesting game. This year, we just ran the ball all over Stanford. Sam Darnold is feeling confident. We're taking it this year. I'm going to say the final score is 45-20. And I can't wait for this game. That is 5:30 Pacific time, 8:30 Eastern time, 7:30 Midwestern time. It's on Fox, and Gus Johnson is my favorite announcer of all time. He just brings so much energy to the game. And I love announcers who yell and who really get into the game. Like Joe Buck and like Al Michaels, all these guys that feel like, no, I have to take this professionally. I have to take this seriously. I have to remain calm and really describe what's going on the field. That's stupid. College football in general is an exciting game. Get excited. Get invested in what's going on. Yell a bit. Like, you have professional sound crew. They know what level you can get to before stuff starts popping and crackling. Just get excited about stuff. And Gus Johnson does that. I love it. So yeah, that is my take on what's going on this week. And that is it for this podcast, guys. Because now that I've talked about everything that needs to be talked about, I've talked about what's going to happen this week as far as our game against Texas. Yeah, that's everything. So, what do you guys think? First off, this is the first episode of all time. What's your team? Those of you listening, comment on YouTube, call in if you're listening on the Anchor app, comment on SoundCloud. Just let me know what your team is, if you're excited for this. Your thoughts on the whole Baker Mayfield thing, your thoughts on Hurricane Irma's impact on college football. What do you think the scores are going to be this week? Just send some calls. I'm excited to finally get this project going because it's great. Also, I should have brought this up earlier, but shout out to Radio J. Wait, hold on one sec. Yeah, Radio J on Fiverr. He made that great intro and just fantastic. He was bragging about like this is the best thing he's ever made. And I don't know if those are his exact words, but like he was really proud of this, and I'm super proud to have that intro. So just if you guys need an intro for your podcast or for some other project, this guy's great. He's got a great voice, great sound mixing. Just hit him up. He's just a great deal on Fiverr. And that is going to do it for this episode of the Tribute to Troy podcast. So until next time, God bless. And stay saucy. Wait, no, that's... Hold up. That's my outro for my YouTube channel. Let's get something special here. Let's just change it up a bit. God bless, and fight on.